Election, Labor, and Pensions. Thank you. Will please come to order. Senator Murray and I will each have an opening statement, then we'll introduce our witnesses. Senator Paul is here to introduce the witness from Kentucky at that time, and then after our witness testimony, the senators will have 5 minutes of questions. Senator Murray and I both have to leave at 10:15 for a while. I have to leave for a while to go to a short event in the House, but we'll continue the hearing. We'll be in the question time by then. You will have already given your testimony and we'll have had a chance to ask you questions, and so we'll go right ahead until about 11:30 or 11:45, depending on the number of senators who come to ask questions. This is our 5th oversight hearing on the law to fix No Child Left Behind. There's not a lot of need to elaborate on what we established in the first 4 hearings. President of the National Education Association said that a dark cloud was lifted in December, and there was a broad consensus as that was true among people who work with children in schools. The President called the new law a Christmas miracle. It had broad support from governors to teachers' unions to school superintendents, chief state school officer, and my hope is that by restoring responsibility to states and classroom teachers, it inaugurates a new era of innovation and excellence in student achievement. Gone are the federal Common Core mandate, the Mother May I conditional waivers, the highly qualified teacher definitions from Washington, the Washington mandates on teacher evaluation. Gone are the federal school turnaround models, federal test-based accountability, and federal definitions of adequate yearly progress. The new law placed some guardrails around state accountability system, but it also placed some guardrails on the Secretary, who specifically prohibited from telling states how to set academic standards, how to evaluate state tests, how to identify and fix low-performing schools, how to create teacher evaluation systems, and how to set goals for student achievement and graduation rate. In May, the Education Department issued its first proposed regulation on accountability systems, and I will focus today on 4 areas that seem to me to be the most in need of overhaul. That is, the regulation needs overhaul, and I'll just mention them briefly. One is the timeline for the new regulations. Senator Murray and I both mentioned this in our last hearing with Secretary King. The law requires states to establish a state-determined methodology to identify schools beginning with the school year 2017-2018. But the regulation, proposed regulation, requires states to start identifying new schools for support and improvement by the beginning of the 2017-18 school year. That timeline would discourage states from doing exactly what we hope they would do, which is develop and implement new accountability systems. States such as Hawaii and Tennessee have begun working with state and local coalitions on innovative approaches to accountability, expecting they'll have until March or May of 2017 to submit them to the department. Under the regulations, state would have to start earlier. Dr. Pruitt from Kentucky will be testifying about that. I look forward to his comments is in his testimony. I asked Dr. King last week whether the proposed regulation would allow a state to develop its new accountability system in 2017-18 and then begin to identify new schools the next year, 2018-19. He said under the current regulations it would not be allowed, but he's open to comment on that. So my interpretation is that the Secretary would be willing to let states wait to identify new schools until the beginning of 2018-19, so long as states are providing additional support to schools that have already been identified under No Child Left Behind waivers. That might sound a little complicated, but it's pretty important to the states. We're hearing a great deal about it all across the board. The law's intention, in my view, is to give states an opportunity to demonstrate innovation in accountability systems, which is now their responsibility. Second one, and Dr. Hammond, Darling Hammond, mentions this in her testimony, has to do with so-called summative ratings. The law says it's up to the states to figure out how to annually measure and differentiate public schools based upon a series of indicators beyond just the federally required math and reading tests. but the proposed rule invents out of whole cloth a requirement that these accountability systems result in each school receiving a single summative score, such as an A to F grading system for all schools. That's not in the law. And for the law even prohibits the Secretary from providing the specific methodology used by states to differentiate or identify schools. The regulation would seem to put the government in Washington back in the business of deciding which schools in Kentucky, Tennessee, Washington, Hawaii are succeeding or failing. I look forward to Dr. Darling-Hammond's comments on that. And then third, state academic standards. Under No Child Left Behind, in effect, the department mandated that states adopt Common Core, and 38 out of the 42 states did that in order to get the waivers. The law repeals that effective mandate with at least 5 specific prohibitions. It no longer requires a state to demonstrate, using that word, that they have adopted challenging standards. They simply have to assure the Secretary they adopted those standards. Dr. Pletnick, in her testimony, questions whether the proposed rule requirement that the state must provide evidence at such time and in a manner specified by the Secretary would equate to the ability of the federal government to reject the state-developed standards. And we look forward to that testimony. And then finally, high-stakes federal tests. The heart of the new law is the end of federal test-based accountability. We kept the 17 tests, but we moved to states and classrooms what to do about the tests. The proposed regulation seems to restore those high-stake mandates. Federally mandated tests would again, and academic indicators would again become the primary means used to determine whether a school is succeeding or not, because once a school is identified in need of improvement, it's going to always be in need of improvement unless it shows significant progress on a federally mandated system. So those are some of the issues that I'm concerned about that the witnesses have mentioned in their testimony. We look forward to hearing from you, Senator Murray.